Thank you very much. And I think in the interest of time, we will get started. Just to indicate that the presentation today is born out of our deliberations during the open forum in December, when there was a discussion that possibly we should think about professionalizing community development, and a small team was put together of volunteers to discuss and just lead in finding some kind of ground on how to go about the discussion on the conversation on professionalizing community development. We have had a number of meetings, and again, spearheaded by Professor DeWitt Schutte, who graciously again agreed to lead in this presentation today. Of course, most of the members are not yet in, but we have Kachi Okezi from Nigeria, based in UK, who is with us. And this is now coming back to the plenary of IACD Sub-Saharan Africa, just to indicate our thinking, and then hopefully we can make a decision going forward. And so that's the background I wanted just to give. We are not prescribing. It is us to deliberate and agree on the way forward. Because again, as we shared online, we started getting some feedback in terms of different directions with regard to professionalizing community development. But let's discuss. We are the professionals. Community development is our business. Welcome, Professor, and take the floor.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, it was a journey working with some experts, I think, in the field, the people on the small group of us that sort of explored the way forward for this type of thing. We are at a position where we would like to share. So I am going to share my screen and give you the point in time where we are now with this project. And it is exactly where we have to get to a point and soundboard the rest of us on our thinking. It is so important that we don't do this and walk this road and on our own, but get the consent from the rest of us. It is contentious, I think. A lot of views on it from different people. So where are we? Just to give you the background of where we started with in our group's thinking. We do consider community development as an identifiable and sort of at this point clearly demarcated discipline. It's rooted in the social sciences with some intersection of the physical, environmental sciences. It is, but pretty much demarcated into the arena of a community development paradigm. It is a relatively new science or a new scientific focus, but we have developed over time our own definitions and jargon, and we are pretty sure-footed that when we talk about community development, we are talking of a tangible, a discipline. We're talking about theories that is focused on this research or this, and research that's focused on this topic in itself. What happened is that a group of volunteers got together and we reached consensus, and we would like to share this consensus with you as colleagues now. We believe that it was worth looking into the principle of possible professional registration. Registration in what format is still to be debated, but the professional community development practitioner we see all over the world, but especially in Sub-Saharan Africa, it's an identifiable individual working in communities. The need is not, the focus is not on the professional registration board, but we embarked on the idea of an association of professionals. Association of Community Development Practitioner Professionals, not community development project leaders. We're talking about community development practitioners as a professional, as a profession in its own. The consensus was that the background should be something, or the underlying theory should be something, or philosophy should be something of inclusion rather, and not exclusion of community development practitioners. We don't want to keep people out. We don't want to play Big Brother, and Big Brother is looking at you. We would rather like to bring people together under the same umbrella. The reason is that it would give the community development practitioner the status, such a registration, the status of a professional for the client, and that he would conduct his expertise in an ethical and professional way. So it's the benefit would be both sides. The client or stakeholders would know who they are dealing with and what qualities of individual they are dealing with, and vice versa. It would give the individual community development practitioner the status of advertising and doing his job. During the whole process, we identified some no-goes. There are a lot of views against professional registration. And some of them, I reflect them to you, and we work through that also. Professional registration may regulate community practitioners extensively and limit their flexibility and creativity. That's the truth. If we go to the professional registration side to the extreme, it could impede us as community development practitioners to excel and do creative thinking in communities, and more flexible than the profession would like to be. So the next one is that professional registration may create unnecessary barriers for those who want to enter. Now, immediately, when you talk about profession, you're talking about qualifications to enter it. And who would you allow in? And we should not go in that direction because we might have a negative impact on the whole exercise of community development initiatives all over the world. And again, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa. So registration may also create a hierarchy of practitioners. Those are the who's who, and those are not the who's who. It may registration may commodify. That was a strong view, one of our colleagues. It may commodify community development into a trading article that you could say, whoa, you have to pay now for this and that. And if you don't have registration, you're worth less. And your input would be worth less. It may prioritize in the process profit over community interest also. The variety of community development projects is too broad to be effectively regulated. So this spectrum of activities that we do as community development practitioners and the type of projects we embark on doesn't allow us for a single registration. It may limit the ability to adapt to unique needs. So this freedom to change your attack and to change your approach to different projects might be restricted by this registration. And it creates thus unnecessary barriers and so forth. And the last one there is, rather than professional registration, support for ongoing professional development and voluntary adherence to ethical standards and guidelines may be more effective in enhancing our community development or the status of our community development practitioners. So rather focus on voluntary attendance to ethical standard guidelines, not going into the professional route, onto the professional or registration route. But the go-to, there will also the counter side of that. There are some arguments that could be in favor of a possible registration. It could establish a community development as a legitimate discipline and raise the profession's profile, and not being just an add-on somebody to a huge project administered by somebody else. We need to have somebody there from community development, and we just add it in as tick the boxes. It's become more commodified. As it becomes more, professional registration can support practitioners that adhere to ethical standards. So there's a safeguard in it, that we deal with people that adhere to ethical standards and are not open for corruption and quick fixes in communities. Registering with a professional association can provide quality assurance both for the public side and ensuring practitioners meet the specific skills, standards, and qualifications, which we have in the IACD professional conduct. Those standards are there. Provide means of recognition for the valuable work that we do, and in the process enhance the status and our visibility and influence as a community development practitioner. Can also promote ongoing professional development for us, and that we expose ourselves to further development and influences and education in this respect, and to create a sense of professional identity and community among ourselves, fostering collaboration and knowledge sharing, which we all need to do. And this is part of the Sub-Saharan African, specifically, division of the IACD, is that we share views and that we share knowledge and that we have master classes that exactly does that. Registration also could enhance the professionalization of community practitioners as a recognized field of practice, attracting more resources and investment from funders and donors as it becomes a more professional action in that sense. So as a summary, we have the two sides. We have a no-go side and a go-to side. Yes, we should go in that direction. It may not be the best approach. And we're open for that. We were open to debate this with our group today. Is it a go-to, no-go, or is it a go-to arena that we should think of? The go-tos, it is argument is can provide professional practitioners with a range of benefits of ongoing development opportunities and so forth. And both the trust and the client stakeholders could better serve the communities in that sense. On the no-go side, we should rather move into the voluntary adhere to ethical standards to promote community development. So there are literally these two sides of the coin, which we had to discuss and would like to share with you. But here, if we put the registration idea on a continuum, you would see on the left there's the typical social movement. And that could be this green agenda sentiment, you know, people get together, they don't know each other, they have an agenda and a theme and a topic, and they rock up at some protest meetings or just organized meetings and so forth. On the other side, you have statutory professional bodies that are registered, peer-regulated professional bodies like medical registration bodies, usually by governments in countries. Engineering also would have that. Accounting would have that. Very strict regulating bodies qualifications, and would have legal powers over those people that register for that. So we sit on this continuum of what I would call professional registration continuum. We have voluntary association. We have a little bit more organized community activists. Typically, you get them among them. They would form activist groups, organizations, activist programs or projects mainly, usually. But and then you have voluntary association also, which is like the IACD. The IACD is a voluntary association. We register with that, we pay our fees, and I lock into voluntary into the Sub-Saharan African meetings like today. We have membership, specifically membership, linked to our fees, and by my membership would end when I don't pay my fees. It looks like the area that we are moving into is a voluntary, formal binding association. Association, not professional body. We're still talking about association here. And this is actually what we are thinking of. So on this continuum here, we are actually talking about not the extreme here on this side, but rather sort of a little bit more than just voluntary association, but a formless binding association. And that takes us a little bit further. The group felt strongly we should not go there. And I must add, my personal background as a sociologist is that we also found that. I was part of a group that refused to be registered as a sociological researcher, to be registered on a register, because it would be a big brother looking at you and what type of research should be allowed or what not. We don't want to be restricted by any professional body on what we should do. So we're not there. We're talking about moving in this space here. So the original question that we argued was, what is the principle of some form of formal registration of community development? What is the principle of the form? There was consensus that we are at a stage where it is possible for some form of registration, and that we should look into that. We are talking about Sub-Saharan Africa at this point in time. We are talking about the typical community development practitioner working in the rural, deep rural area like arena, working in rural areas, trying to do her utmost to get going, trying to get the respect and recognition from stakeholders, funders, people that says, yes, she moves into that direction. Who is she? What is her background? What makes her so special in this? And that is why we should probably consider moving into that space. The registration type should rather be an association and not a professional body. We're not going to that extreme. So you could see this is where we think where our thinking was at this point in time, which we want to like to soundboard with our colleagues here. And this is at this point where we are here for an open discussion of people with people that were not part of this small group of 5 people that discussed this possibility. But what do you think about it? And this is where we'd like to hear your views, that you should unmute and share views. We will take down notes, Daniel. This is what we have said, and this is where we are at this point in time. Should we go for this registration thing, or should we not? Please, ladies and gentlemen, we listen. We listen. We are here to listen what your views are. There could be those that go for it and those that feel strongly that we should not go for it. And we need to have the spectrum of views on the table. The floor is open for that. Daniel?
Thank you, Prof, for the background information that you've given us and indicating the possible options that exist for us. We can end the discussion if we decide there is no merit in pursuing any kind of professionalization or registration, and this will become one of the shortest webinars you've had. But then in view of what you're also indicating, we also need to take into account that we are responsible, and as professionals, we owe it unto ourselves to ensure that there is order in the discipline that we practice and in the discipline that we promote, and also in our interactions with communities. We also need to safeguard public interest by ensuring that those who go out there in the name of community development, they are people we can vouch for, in the sense that they have the minimums in terms of knowledge and skills, and also the requisite values, the requisite methods. They subscribe to the principles that underpin community development. And so, in as much as we might want to run away from putting some order, guided by these considerations, it is still important that we ask ourselves, which is the best way forward to move this discussion, so that then we can safeguard our discipline, safeguard our practice. And that is where we are. And the WIT has indicated very clearly that we have to make a choice to proceed. The discussion arose from an open forum. We are back again to the open forum for interventions. So the floor is open. What exactly should be the way forward in terms of, based on what the WIT has already shared with us? So, and just unmute yourself and go. Yes, Kachi.
Can I? Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Prof, for that summary of our discussions. As one of the volunteers in this small team, I just wanted to sort of add some detail that perhaps summarizes it from a different perspective. I think there's clear agreement on the driving imperatives for this exercise, the reason, the rationale for it. There's quality assurance and accountability to the public and to ourselves and to those we work with, our clients. There's also the need for public protection, particularly the vulnerable sections of community. There's also the need for developing a kind of community of practice where professionals and practitioners develop themselves, learn from one another, share knowledge and network. Also, the concern that throughout this conversation, one of the things that we all seem to agree with is not to make this profession elitist, to avoid ending up with an elitist or perceived elitist group of professionals or practitioners, but at the same time to balance that with some kind of liberation, freedom for practitioners and professionals to practice their discipline, in a very flexible environment where they know that by interaction, they grow and they contribute. There's also the need to develop a sense of stakeholding, so that practitioners really feel a part of the outcomes that they're helping to create. But these are the drivers, as I said, the imperatives. But then there are challenges, practical challenges in terms of making it happen. And I speak more to those. One is the issue of the place of IACD in this structure. Very important that we consider. I have my own views. We've shared some there as well. But it's important that as we discuss this, we look at it from the point of view of where IACD will feature in all of this. We can't throw away all the amazing resources and experience that IACD has gathered. A lot of things are already available, in terms of what we need to invest. So we might look at adopting as many of those as possible. We'll need to look at the qualification structure in terms of minimum entry qualifications. I know that there's been the issue last time that we discussed about a commitment to a minimum of about 12, participating in 12 of the webinars that we organize as a precondition. My view would have been, first of all, to reduce that to about 2 or 3, but rather than have those as a precondition, you have a precondition for maybe 2, but a commitment to continuing professional development, a commitment to CPD would be a better way to approach it, so that you don't present it as a barrier to entry, rather as a commitment that each individual will make when joining the association. And then finally, one of the things we recognized was that Sub-Saharan Africa, like other regions, is made up of different jurisdictions, so many different jurisdictions. In different countries, these things are done somewhat differently. I know we've spoken about Kenya, spoken about Nigeria. The laws are different, so we need to make sure we take account of those differences in coming to a conclusion. I think also the relationship with IACD needs to be one of the guiding lights in making this decision. With IACD, let me give you a practical example. Will IACD be responsible? Can we have IACD manage the administration, or will that be done separately? We had the issue, for example, membership dues. Will that be paid? So will an individual pay to IACD to become a member, to remain a member of IACD, paying dues to IACD, and also a member of the Nigerian Association, paying dues to the Nigerian Association? Or can it be kind of collapsed into one, pay the dues to either IACD, and IACD will pay subventions to each of the, those are the structures we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Kachi, and for those additions to our discussion. And so the floor is open, and I think thank you very much for making it so clear, because again, one of the points of departure was we need to ask ourselves, all those on board as members of IACD, what is the minimum qualification that they have in terms of training in the knowledge, skills, methods in community development, and also what kind of continuous professional education do they have? Some of us were in school very many years ago. Do we still want to say what we learned in school is still useful today to be allowed to continue to practice? And so the floor is open. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Yes,
Daniel. Thank you very much, Devet, and thanks, Kachi, for the additional comments. I find myself wondering, what is the difference between IACD as a voluntary structure, a voluntary association structure, and then, as Devet said, the one for community development Sub-Saharan Africa as being slightly more formal? Because, as you say, Kachi, we have this amazing structure of IACD with all the resources and everything, the support that comes with it. Can we not somehow incorporate the professionalizing of community development globally, and then have regional interest groups, if you like, as we do have Sub-Saharan Africa, Oceania, Asia, and so on, instead of having to decide whether this is part of IACD or is it a separate thing? That's my one issue, to maybe just get a bit of clarification as to the difference between IACD as a voluntary association and then the one which is, as you put in that pink box, slightly more formal, a binding association. But then my other concern is also with the issue of, I'm glad to see that we're not, inclusion and all of those things are in there, because obviously this is a very, very important issue. We're not saying that only people with formal university degrees or so on are the people that can be included. If I think of someone like Arena and her partner Tace, who have got enormous passion and concern for the community, to me, and I've come across so many people in all parts of Southern Africa, to me, that is a massive qualification, if you like. you know, that commitment, that passion, that desire to work in communities. People may not have a formal university qualification or even finished school formally and so on, but people who've worked in communities and who are in touch on the ground, to me, that is a vital qualification, if you like, because those people are at the coalface. That is lived experience. Those are people who can give us as a body so much wisdom and so much experience and skills, which may not have a certificate attached to them, if you like. But those are just my thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much, Janine. I'm not so sure I want to respond at this time, but just to indicate this discussion, we wanted first to localize it within the Sub-Saharan African context. Then once we have clarity of what it is that we want, then now we can push it and put it on the table of IACD and say this is how we wish to proceed. If there is buying at IACD board, then it can be cascaded to the rest of the regions in the same kind of framework. Again, one of the other aspect that also is important is IACD is open, voluntary. You apply, pay your membership, and you become a member. Often there isn't so much in terms of looking into whether you have any professional training or any kind of preparation to work as a community development practitioner, so to speak. What we are trying to say in the region, and that's a bit of professionalizing, we are trying to look at that we need to have some minimum in terms of subscription to the core principles of community development, the skills and the knowledge, some of which, as you have indicated, are gained through lived experience. And if that can be demonstrated, that's a starting point. Then the second bit that we are proposing is some measure of continuous professional development, where again, you subject yourself to learn with the rest of the peers in community development so that you can develop the practice and put some order in what in the development of the discipline and the development of the practice. And one of the starting point was our webinar series is one of the opportunities we have for continuous professional development using the international standards for community development with the modules. Again, that's a very important tool that can be used, again, to facilitate continuous professional development. And so if this module is agreeable within our context, then we can very easily now put it on the table of IACD board, and then we can move forward. I think it's also important as we talk that we also draw a line between community development and community work. There's community development and there's community work. And many of us who say we are doing community development, we are doing community work. And that needs to be, we need to have a very clear line. Because community work can be cascaded and I mean can be scaled up if now the workers there get to expose in the practice the principles and the values, the ethics of community development, and they develop those skills so that then ultimately they are operating in a systematic, scientific manner in their work with communities. Yes, Jim.
I just add for general interest to the discussion, and in some ways, just to say the system that we have in England gets quite close to some of the notions of Devet's input. In the England context, and I've got to say, I'm talking about England, not the UK, because the system is quite different in Scotland from England. But in England, we have the England Standards Board for community development, and universities themselves can be accredited by the English Standards Board for the kind of quality and content of their the learning. But the situation remains that someone might well get a degree from an English university, and it's assumed that that's a professional qualification when the situation is not. So this is where the English Standards Board, invites universities to offer the learning program to meet the standards for that. And very rarely do we use the language of, is this professional or not professional? Because that's a kind of strange word, because it's often assumed that professional means you get paid for it, not necessarily to do with the work that you actually do. So I think we've got to not get confused with the use of that word, professional. And we have to accept that some local volunteers and activists in reality are actually as competent in every way than many people who leave these qualifying programs. So I think IACD provides a framework that is an umbrella for people at all levels, and a supportive framework for that. No one's mentioned it in particular, but in the England context, we also have what's called a portfolio route to qualification, which doesn't require people to be technically involved with any formal higher education institution, but does actually make possible the person's capacity for critical reflective comment, which is reflected in their portfolio of evidence drawn from their day-to-day experience. So just really adding these to the discussion rather than any pronouncements in a heavy way. That's where we are in England at present.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for pointing that one out, because that's the point we are saying, and Kachi was indicating that different countries have different ways of accrediting programs,
Sure.
which then are taught at different levels and from tertiary to university level. And that's the point at which some of these regulatory bodies come on board. But then what we are trying to say is that we don't want to go that route, because then that means then we need to have to go into all the different 54 country legislations so that we can be able to operate. But what we are trying to say is that at a peer level, then we can find a way of ultimately creating some recognition for the practitioners of community development. Kachi, you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to add to that. Janine raised an important point, but I think it's one that we had touched upon before, and that is partially answered by what Jim said. And I remember when we discussed it a few months ago, I did suggest this, incorporating or mainstreaming vocational qualifications. Pretty much what Jim, in line with what Jim was saying there. The NVQs, National Vocational Qualification. I've actually, many years ago in Sheffield, I ran, NVQ programs for community development workers who had been doing it on the coalface for years, but had no formal qualifications. The good thing about that is that it assesses you where you are on the job based on observed practice and also critical guided reflection. So I think that is important to build in, and it exists in England. I actually think.
Okay, thank you very much. I think where we find ourselves is as an international body of bringing together community development practitioners globally. We still don't have a mechanism of saying this is what should be presented as minimum qualifications for somebody to be recognized to be a community development practitioner. And many of the times I keep on getting questions from colleagues about whether we are able to provide some career path to facilitate some professional development, some professional recognition in terms of somebody who is accepted that they have competence in a certain discipline by way of the values, by way of training, by way of preparation. And this is the point we are talking about, trying to come up with not the university kind of regulated process, but a peer regulated process, where ultimately based on what we agree ourselves in this region, then we can even have a certification of some sort, saying we recognize so-and-so can be recognized as a community development practitioner because they subscribe to the ideals, to the practice, to the principles, and they have the methods of what it takes to be recognized as such. And that way now that's a point we are saying, we are talking about putting order in the discipline. There was some discussion at some point at IACD, but then it was never concluded because again, of so many other commitments within IACD, but I'm sure it's somewhere pending. I was part of that subcommittee that was discussing accreditation. The work was never finished, but this is the same discussion that keeps on coming up, and I keep on getting requests from colleagues in this kind of direction. The floor is still open.
Okay, thank you, Daktari. Thank you, Daktari, and thank you, Professor DeWitt, for the presentation. I was also part of this team. And something that we also observed is that some facts are practical in the sense that you realize there are some very basic things in community development that are not clear, that even the professionals, even people either in the field or in the universities and colleges, that we are still not familiar with. So therefore, having such an association brings us together, brings harmony in the field. And perhaps I'm traveling like to Nigeria to practice community work, community development. If I have a certificate showing that I have passed through the very, very basics that are provided in this association, I think I look more credible, I look more genuine while I'm practicing. The vice versa, if someone is traveling from South Africa, coming to Kenya to do some community work, then you show that certificate that other than having a degree, other than practicing community development informally in the field, I am certified. I have this certification from IACD Sub-Saharan Africa Association to show that I qualify, I have the knowledge and skills to practice. I think that also is a key motivator. But I want to agree with Janine that we can't run away from the IACD because that's the mother, that's our heart. All these regulations, of course, cost implications that might come in the future can be solved if we don't run away from IACD. Thank you.
Thank you, Boniface. And I think what you're indicating in terms of where we move from here, in the event we agree on, we are going this route, the rest are details now that can be discussed within the framework of IACD. Because as we indicated, we have, as a team discussing this concept, we are alive to the fact that we are not creating a parallel structure to IACD. We are working within the ambit of IACD. It's just a discussion that has been localized at a Sub-Saharan African level. Once there is clarity, then it is put within the structures of IACD for processing and then adoption. Martin.
Hello, everyone, and good to see you all again. I think community development is typically rooted in every society that we find ourselves. And globally, IACD took into consideration a lot of some of these dynamisms before putting down the standards. So what I'm thinking is we have to then create a balance. We have to look at how to create a balance where we can harness, like Janine was saying, that the indigenous knowledge or practices at the ground level, coupled with what is at the academic level. And looking at what is in the society, what was rooted in the society, the community development, is what the academicians took up and then tried to formalize it and standardize it for practices. So I think we need to look at how to create a balance where we can stick to the dynamism, where we don't deprive those without the academic certificates or documentation to certify them, yet they have the indigenous knowledge and practically implementing that at the community level, coupled with those at the academic level where they've gone through the formal teachings and lessons that have been given to in the classroom. So it's burden on us to create a balance, like I'm saying, so that we can be able to accommodate and harness all this expertise, both locally and then formally, to ensure that the discipline in which we are in delivers per the standards and the principles that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Emmanuel.
Hello, good morning, Doc, and good morning to everyone. I think this discussion is quite crucial, and I'm happy to be participating in this. I think the IAD is currently playing a very crucial role in promoting the values and ethics of community development. And I think it was very refreshing to hear Dr. Mua distinguish between community work and community development. And I think that distinction should also guide our conclusion going forward. Yes, everybody can be doing community work, but there are ways to do community work. Because for instance, if you have an organization or you are leading an organization for a particular intervention in a particular community, and your organization is a political or partisan organization, you may be doing some community work, but by community development standards, there may be more refining of your approach. If your organization is religious biased, it may be doing some community work, but in the sense of pure community development and how to bring on board everyone that needs to come on board and move everybody along, your religious bias may be hindering the progress. And so I think what we should also be considering at this point was a point made earlier by Kechi, that where does the IACD feature in all this? Because we are at a point where the IACD is the only visible global organization that is promoting these values and these ethics. And I think, like we've heard from earlier speakers, the IACD has a very flexible but decentralized structure. So that, yes, there's a global IACD, but a global IACD is helping the regional IACDs to localize the global values and principles that the IACD stands for. And so I think some concept of professionalizing this may be done. It may not necessarily be, like it has already been stated, a formal elitist regulation that cuts out the beneficiaries who may not have some formal education, but have a key stake in the process, may have a very keen interest in participating to make it work. And so I think some form of formalization or regulation or professionalization should be considered. But I also like to indicate that I agree with an earlier speaker who said we should be mindful of how we use certain words like the professionalism or professional. And if we need to use it, then we actually need to break it down so that it doesn't cut out key sections of the process. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Emmanuel. And let's hear Casti and then Thais, and then we can make some decision.
Yes, thank you for allowing me. I'm literally first time here, but got experience from other associations and professional bodies. So out of that, my comment, the question I would ask first Currently, the focus and what Prof. Schutte has put on the table is absolutely, relevant. But we have to ask the question also from the perspective of a community. What do a community need? Definitely credibility. If they allow any person to come in and do development in that community, there are certain standards that the community should be able to demand and require that the development practitioner complies with. That will enhance the work on the ground considerably. That will accelerate the process. Yes, it can be just smoke and mirrors also, but I think if we put that in place, that an accredited developer, community developer practitioner comes in, and we can say, well, that's a skill set of this person. Building what Arina talked about in the beginning, that trust at the beginning in the community takes so long. Anything that can make that time shorter and put the platform in place for your work and for the program, that will be an advantage, a huge advantage and a value add by IACD. Okay, the second thing is what is needed in terms of the funders of programs. Their monitoring and evaluation, accountability, and then very specifically impact measurement becomes critical. But first thing there is also credibility. They want to see that the money ends up where it's intended to end up, and almost a governance and a measure of that through IACD, that we can say, well, this ethical standards, this is how we will function, and we comply, and we can be measured against that. That will, in terms of your proposal, any proposal for any program to funders, that will be highly beneficial. And then obviously the practitioners. And I agree fully with it that we don't want to be exclusive. You want to include, and it's not only your tertiary education level, but you want almost a continuum, and somebody mentioned that, a pathway of development. You can become part of what you experience, where you're at, and the recognition of prior learning and recognition of portfolio of evidence, I think must play a critical role for anybody in any case. But then from there to create a pathway for that person, even if it's just a community worker, exactly, that comes in, to be able to develop further, because that's a need of the practitioners, to have a platform for development of themselves and their profession. Yes, and then at the top tier, to be able to say you're a professional in this, not just here, and I'm cognizant of what was said about that, what Kachia said about oh no, more money or whatever. That's not about it, but recognition that in this field you've got specific skill sets that are valuable, and it's not necessarily tertiary based, although that is one pillar, more so based on experience, portfolio of experience. So I would look at it from that perspective, and have a volunteer association, but then also incorporate a training component, a pathway for training, and then thirdly to be able to register then also on a professional, and there the registration component kicks in.
Thank you very much, Thais. Looks like you have already given a conclusion, but we have three. Thank you very much.
No.
And I think it's very important.
You listen to other people and then summarize it. Doesn't mean it's my ideas. It was the group's.
That's very important. That's very. Anyway, that's welcome. The point I wanted to raise is that the connection between a community worker and a community development practitioner. the difference between community development and community work. Some of the community workers, if we put some kind of mechanism, we can already provide a pathway, so that then, of course, they become community development practitioners by way of continuous professional training, and also making it possible for them also to scale up what they are doing. Because the point I want to just to give a clarity, anybody who we find in a hospital in a lamp jacket is not necessarily a doctor. Unfortunately, that's where we find community development. Everybody's in a lamp coat and they are doing community development. And we need to be able to draw a line by being able to read the badges on our jackets as we work in communities. Kirsty, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and lovely to be here and speak with you all this morning. Good morning from Scotland, and I thought I would try and pick up some of the points that you have made that we in Scotland have been debating and discussing and have taken some actions on, as I'm sure most of you will be aware, only within the last 25 years. So I work for the Community Learning and Development Standards Council, Scotland. We are the professional body for people who work or volunteer in community learning and development in Scotland, and that includes community development alongside the other broad areas of adult education and youth work. So as Jim pointed out, there are some differences in Scotland and England and the rest of the UK. I'll try and pick up some of the themes that were coming through the discussion there and how we deal with them in the Standards Council. We're not perfect, I'll throw that one out there right now, but we try our best to grapple with some of these really difficult discussions. So we were established in 2008, so we are really still quite a young organisation. We have 3 core areas of responsibility. One is registration, and that's registration of practitioners. So we have 2 different types of membership, and this hopefully starts to touch on the topic around it shouldn't just be people who have a university degree level qualification who can be members and practitioners. So we have a registered member status, and that's for those practitioners who do have that degree level qualification, but we also have associate membership status, and that's for people who are practicing community learning and development, but don't have that degree level qualification in community development. Our second area of responsibility is for the approval of qualifications. And again, we've talked about how we can make sure that those qualifications are fit for purpose and that they are equipping trainee practitioners with the skills and experience that they will need in order to practice. So we provide an approval process for those. It is voluntary, so the universities choose whether to ask us to come in and approve their qualifications, so that there's a potential flaw in there because they don't need to do that. Equally, and I should have said this when I was speaking about membership, membership is voluntary. Membership of the Standards Council is voluntary. It was a debate that was held over a long period of time when we were looking to establish the Standards Council as to whether membership should be mandatory or voluntary. And the view of the sector was that it should be voluntary, primarily because we don't mandate our the people that we work with in communities to work with us. So why would we do it to ourselves? I think that is shifting. I have to say, in recent years, there seems to be a shift that, for the safeguarding reasons that you've mentioned, we should think about, particularly for those practitioners who have a university qualification, that it should be mandatory. Not for volunteers, not for associate members necessarily, but for people who have chosen to go down the university qualification route. That's still up for debate. There is no definitive answer to that, and there will be no change to that in the near future. So we have our registration system, our approvals, and the third area is our professional learning support. And again, you know, hearing you talk about career pathways, the different options that are available to people. And one of the things that we ask people to do when they register as a member with us is to commit to undertake a certain amount of professional learning each year. And again, there are different ways to do that, but the way that was chosen when we were established was to try and quantify in some way that however many hours per week you work or volunteer, you should do the equivalent as a minimum per year of professional learning. So I work 37 hours a week. So my professional learning that I need to undertake is 37 hours per year. If I volunteered for 10 hours a week, it would be 10 hours per year. So we've tried to kind of quantify it, but of course that's a minimum, and it's quite easy to clock up 10 hours of professional learning. So people very often do more. I can put some links in the chat if it would be helpful to some of our web pages that show you some of our commitments, for example. So again, as well as committing to the the professional learning, you commit to practice by the values, ethics and competencies of CLD as well. So we've got all of that in place. It's an evolving picture, I would say, and there are always things to consider. We have only within the last 5 years introduced a deregistration process, recognising that when someone joins, if unfortunately there is a problem with their practice, we need to have a way to deregister someone from their status as member. So we are still evolving as an organisation, but I just thought there might be some interesting and useful things to aid your discussion and your thoughts. So I'll pop some links in the chat. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Kirsty, and that makes life a lot more easier for us. I hope you can remember this. You can recognize this.
I do. I think, was that from the Dundee conference?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I was there. Lovely to see it.
Okay. Yeah, so we have Abdul and then Jim, and I think we need to make a decision going forward so that we can have some time to conclude. Abdul, if you can make it very brief.
Yeah, okay.
There's quite some background from where you are. We can barely hear you.
Yes.
You put it on the chat.
It's just coming back a bit to Vet's where he started from in the beginning, but I suppose one of the conclusions that hopefully we might reach in today's session is that every country might have a standards board or a standards council, and in a sense is to disconnect that from our heads from universities, in that the standards council is made up of practitioners, you know, and of course we're caught in dreadful institutional language that, you know, what I think Kirsty is talking about is an increase your capacity for critical reflection. And in a sense, if you go to university, then their job is to improve that. We don't label it with, I've got a degree, you have a degree, you don't have a degree. That's playing a game. The assumption is that the person will increase their capacity for critical reflection, you know, and that's the importance of the, you know, of a standards board. And what is happening in some situations in England, perhaps Scotland in some ways, is, for example, these universities are reducing the amount of time that a person must spend in practice. Whereas in the social work profession, 50% of the learning experience must be actually in practice. 50%. In some cases, universities are offering community development qualifications based on something like less than 20% of experience actually doing the job, if you know what I mean. So anyway, I think where the vet was taking me in the beginning was the IACD should actually be recommending to each national group that it would be useful to have a standards board made up of practitioners, essentially, and they would advise and guide and take us through some of these challenges. So I don't think the IACD is a standards board. You know, I think that its job is to encourage that to happen, in my view. And I think that's what Yvette was taking us in the beginning, but maybe I've misread that.
Thank you, Jim. IACD is a network of community development practitioners, but of course, with the huge capital that comes with that big name, there's a lot more that can be done. And this is one way with that we can help find some kind of pathway in managing this process going forward. I think I want to go back to DeWitt. It looks like there's consensus, we go forward. And so you can run through the remaining slides.
Create faith with the shoulders. Talking about the minimum level that we agreed upon. Talking about ethical content and agreed values. That's what we talked about. It refers to the IACD values for sure. And the diverse, that's what Jim referred to now, the manifestations of community development content includes regional content and we leave. The last slide, the purpose of the proposed should not be to exclude, that we confirm. Not be taken step by step. I don't think a case of angels rush, how do we, it says that the fools rush, live and practice could step by it could pave the way for the Sub-Saharan exercise. And in detail, but are very we've heard of what and the details of qualifications, and be sure-footed when go into the section. The application. Ladies and gentlemen, we sort of had the of gut. We have the view for some form of inclusion with exclusion. We have the gut feel for some criteria. Problem that I have with IACD is with development project, I have unethical conduct. The IACD gonna deregister me? They fees. And there's no, we need to have something when we go to that level of a practitioner, so commit myself to the principle. So that just one step ahead of the previous slide. It's not going in there, just one step ahead of entering formal association. So this is Daniel.
Thank you, DeWitt. And I think from the thrust of our discussion is that as members of IACD, we are saying we are good enough, but we are saying we can do more by sort of trying to put some order and also to put some kind of responsibility in terms of our commitment to the discipline, and also in terms of systematizing, in terms of the process of also accountability. So that is just not just having a certificate of membership, where now issues of accountability do not come in, and issues of commitment to professional development in the practice do not come into place. And this is a discussion that then we are saying we can scale up in our conversation now with IACD, so that then we can be able to find a way of protecting the discipline and protecting the practice, and ensuring public good and is protected. We need, of course, we can't exhaust the discussion here, but we need to be able now to put together all these thoughts and then put them together, and then in a way also be able then to have a document we can present to IACD. We have had a committee of 4 so far who have been active. Professor DeWitt, Kachi, Boniface, and myself. If we need some people to take the discussion forward. Volunteers. Community development is about volunteerism.
Can I suggest that maybe one of the team of volunteers puts together the thoughts and the comments that came out of today's discussion and circulate it for all of us on the SSA group? Especially for some people, I could see there were people who kept dropping in and out. So as soon as Jessica sends us the recording, then maybe one of your team could circulate just some very brief notes about
yeah, that would be fine.
Came out of the discussions.
Yeah, thank you, Janine. We'll put together
my sound is back. I lost sound. I'm back now.
Okay, yeah, we'll put together the write-up and a summary of also this discussion as a way to help us move forward. But even before that, we also need now to clean up, harmonize what has been discussed, so that it is at a point where now it can be taken to the next level. We're asking if there are volunteers to join the group.
Hello, Daniel. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ibrahim, I can hear you, but there's a bit of background.
Okay, a bit of background problem. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay, I volunteer to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Abdul Ibrahim. Okay.
Yes.
Anybody else volunteering?
Emmanuel has also volunteered in the chat.
Okay, Emmanuel. Okay. Any final comments, any final thoughts?
If it would be,
yes, Jim, then we come to Kachi.
if it would be helpful to the working group, then I'm fairly confident that those of us involved with the England Standards Board and similarly in Scotland would be happy to give the kind of web links to the to the materials that are there, if that would be helpful just in the thinking. But I think that we'd be very happy to do that and support and help the conversation, if that would be helpful, Daniel.
Okay, thank you very much, and we really appreciate, and we already appreciate the links shared with us by Castagemel. The Standards Council and the Standards Learning, they have provided quite a lot of backstopping to IACD itself. The International Standards for Community Development is largely courtesy of the work of the Scottish team. And we are open again to continue the learning. Thank you very much.
I was just wondering, perhaps by way of reiteration, it might be a good idea to just quickly talk us through the process map you know, what is the itinerary of this exercise? Because you mentioned reporting back to IACD. While I understand that this is an IACD organization and our membership, we are gathered here under the umbrella of IACD, but we are also looking at meeting our own wider regional needs. Is this conversation specifically for the benefit of IACD? If you can just clarify that. I'm asking for, I'm sure a lot of people will probably be feeling the same. Yes.
Wow. That's a nice one. Okay, DeWitt, you wanted to say something? Or even possibly respond to the same.
Yes, Daniel, that's also the same question I want to ask. Hello, Daniel.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Yeah, that was the same question I want to ask, the question that Dr. Kachi has said.
Okay, let me give it a go. I think the IACD should be informed that we are venturing in this direction, and that is as far as it goes at this point in time. I think the focus would be on Sub-Saharan Africa and see how we should tailor make it for our environment. It could be lessons learned for other divisions, other regions, for them to adapt and tweak if they also want to venture in that direction. It is clear that the access qualification is going to be fairly unique. It's going to be a point that we have to come back to us as a group to say, what are we talking about? How are we going to say we have a practitioner that we call a community development professional practitioner, and we have the difference between that and a church parish worker in the community. Something has to go into that direction. I think there's a lot of work still to be done. A lot of thinking, a lot of soundboarding, and it's going to be a slow process. Qualifications is going to exclude some people, but it need not to exclude the people we want to include. So I think that will be the challenge for us for the future.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think let's also take into account, one of the principles of community development is that you don't create structures when there are already structures in place. And so we are working within the ambit of IACD. It's not that we realize there's a need to start a conversation in this direction, not separate from IACD, but within the framework of IACD. We are just an active component of IACD in this region. Of course, the other regions have their own priorities that they are discussing, but this issue came up as one of the areas that we need to discuss at length during our open forum discussion in December. And so that's where now the discussion still continues. When eventually it's finished, we still need to put it within the framework of IACD. And one of the things that was coming through in IACD is the issue of the standards, because the standards were coming in to put order in the practice of community development within IACD. The question has been, how do we do it? We have done some survey amongst the members. I hope you responded and give input. The report is going to be discussed in next week or so in the Training and Professional Development Committee of IACD. And this is also part of what I suppose, with your permission, I will also be reporting, because I've already indicated there's a discussion going on in this particular direction. And this fits in within the framework of the Committee of Training and Professional Development within IACD. And so we are not working in isolation or in competition with IACD. That is the roadmap, the framework that we are in. And then with the covering of IACD, we can do most of the things that we are suggesting we can do and appropriate from the goodwill that IACD possesses globally to be able to do some of these things a lot more easily, and also exploiting the networks that IACD has, so that then we can be able to lead in this direction. And I'm very sure other regions will also very easily come on board and be able also to do the same for the benefit of the practice and the discipline. I hope that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so then I think what we'll do is that we'll put together the notes, and the subcommittee will meet and deliberate, and then we'll share the same within our frameworks, and then we lead the way forward. And then again, I'll be reporting in IACD during the training and professional development committee, so that there is already taking note of what is happening in this region and what we are proposing in terms of professionalizing the discipline. And again, we'll be looking towards the Scottish team. They have already led the way globally, and so we will learn from the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I volunteered as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Kachi. And with all due respect, we will continue to request DeWitt to continue leading us in this region of the world. It's the elders who lead, and until you are anointed as an elder, then you subject yourself to the leadership of the elders. Is that okay, DeWitt? Okay, thank you very much. So going forward, next month, we are discussing the role of youth in community development. We are in a continent where the youth constitute close to what? 70% of the population?
55%.
Yeah, so if we are talking about community development without the youth, then there's a problem. Because then we are left with the elderly persons and the children, who are very few. So that's what the discussion will be in. And Nancy is here with us, who will be leading the discussion with John. Nancy, you want to say hi? And invite us to your presentation next month.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Nancy Biwott, based in Kigali, Rwanda. Really looking forward and excited to have this session. So John and I have invited the youth themselves to speak for themselves. So please join us for this session and let's have this discussion together. Have a lovely week ahead. Thank you,
Okay.
Daniel.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you to everybody. And can you bring this to a close? Thank you very much for finding time to participate in this 27th edition of the IACD Sub-Saharan African Region webinars. Bye-bye and have a good day. Nice evening and good night to those who are already going to bed.